Hey everyone, it's Natalie here. Um, so I was sitting here having some fruit and yogurt and just going through some of my um, comments from the recent videos. And one of the comments really stood out. Someone asked, like, as an empath, how do I, work with dying people and like reconcile that experience? And my first, reaction to that was, well, fine, like it's great. And then I realized, like, yeah, no, I can see why that question would be asked. It's a really good question. Every time I start a video, Google wants to remind me about a password that I'm supposed to enter, which I can never find. That's how it is. Such is the way. Anyway, the more I thought about it, the more I just kind of thought, that's a really good question. Because there was a time, like as an empath, that I would not have been very good with situations like that. And it raises a whole other kind of inquiry and contemplation about what it means to be an empath. So I'm just going to answer this one. Speaking for myself, and I'm going to say it probably has nothing to do with other empaths at all. And in the comment section, I'm going to link to another video I made where I was talking about some of this and some of the issues that people have when they're sensitive. And we'll say it was a VR that I made back in the beginning of the year, about what are your clairs. And it was to Ash from, at the time she was Tarot Yogi. She's now Inner Divine Tarot. And yeah, I talk a lot about what I'm referring to, in terms of just like empaths have a whole different, we have a whole different setup going on. I address a lot of that in there. And there's some resources I think I might recommend too, in terms of like really good books. And so on, if you're an empath. I mean, it's just rough. If you're an empath, like life can be really, really rough, and just not easy to deal with. Where death is concerned, and where I'm concerned, specifically related to dealing with death, I would say, generally speaking, and this is going to sound not great, and I'm aware of how it could sound, but I find it bizarrely like really energizing. Something happens at the moment of death that is unlike any other moment we experience as a human being. And being with a person or an animal that is at that moment, as terrifying as it sounds, like, and as much as it would seem like it would be an overwhelming thing to witness, it's really not. It's if you can be, I find, if I can be with it and just stay in that moment with that other being, and any other people that are there at that time, the moment and the experience seem to just take care of themselves. Like they don't need much. They don't need anything from me, other than my willingness to be really present and really like dialed in. And if I can do that and stay there, knowing that really, and trusting fully that's it. That's all that's needed. It's actually amazing. It's amazing. Something happens at that moment that is unlike anything that happens at any other moment in life, except perhaps maybe birth. And I've never witnessed a birth, so I don't know. Well, I've witnessed an animal giving birth, and I was also too young at that time to really fully appreciate what I was witnessing, if you know what I mean. I think I would appreciate it and engage it from a very different place now. I had guinea pigs when I was growing up, and I remember watching my favorite guinea pig, Athena, give birth in the middle of the night a couple of times. I'd wake up in the night and I'd hear her, and I knew. So I'd go and sit and watch and be with her and watch the babies come. But I know that I had no, compared with how I would see it now, I don't think, I just didn't have the same level of, I think, ability to appreciate it at that time in my life. Does it make you really emotional? Absolutely. Even like drawing specific moments of death to mind that I've witnessed can, just happened a moment ago, it can really bring it back to being very fresh, right there, right now. And I would say that is an experience for me that it tends to settle me right back into my own heart space. It's very recentering and regrounding. And beautiful. And I think because, when a person, or when a client leaves their body, I would say, it definitely it depends on the situation, and it really depends on the person. Like, did I know that person really well in life? And so am I also in some way like grieving their death for myself, for my own loss? Or, am I crying and am I emotional because I've witnessed something that is so precious and so beautiful that, the body, it's bigger than really what the body can fully take in or hold in. And so there's emotion that comes out as a result of being with it. So I would say, generally I'm not afraid of emotion as long as I've been dealing with my own feelings and emotions and unmet needs away from my work. And I'd say that applies whether I was teaching or working customer service. Talk about a burnout if you're an introvert or an empath. Customer service will do it fast. Regardless of what it is, if you're taking care of yourself and your own needs, and spending the time that's necessary, to process your own emotions, then, the emotions that come up from other people are less likely to, snap. It's like Velcro. They won't snag your, stuff and create a big rip when you try to pull it apart, or cause that confusion that goes on sometimes where it's like, I don't know, is this mine? Is it this someone else's? What is it? Yeah. And I say that, and, I don't know. I will see over time, like, what the impact is, really. I can only speak from the experiences I've had so far. And so far, so good, in the sense that it tends to leave me feeling energized and on purpose, and a lot more like tender and like receptive. I'm more available to the way that the world around me is, or the way that I'm feeling. It just kind of, it takes the scales off, that we use to armor ourselves in the world. But if you're used to doing that as a practice, I feel like I'm at my best. I feel like I'm most like myself when those scales aren't there. And the world, I'm reminded of this very recently because my family has a tendency, on one side in particular, and it really bleeds over directly to my mom and my sister a lot. Their natural response to the world and to meeting things is to build walls against it and build a hard shell, a hard armor of scales that will, on some level, protect them from it. And it's really hard to be with if you're someone who's working. I've never had a very good success at having scales at all. Even when I tried really hard, it would come out, I'm someone who it'll leak. And, it can leak out in the form of really beautiful energy that's gentle and loving and really lovely to be around, or it can leak out like toxic waste, from a nuclear dump site. And whether it's one or whether it's the other is up to me. And it's up to whether I want to take the time that's needed in order to practice and be with it, and sort out my own stuff. And then which means also in the process taking those scales off and away from the heart, metaphorically, or not. And I'm at a point in my life where I really, for the last probably 9 years, I'd say, I really have no use for the scales, or even for attempting to have them, because they don't serve me at all. I've had a lot of illness in my, self, what is it called, where your immune system, autoimmune responses in my body. And I have a nervous system at this point from going through a lot of abuse and a lot of traumatic circumstances that is now wired a particular way. So if I'm in any way not listening to my body, or not listening to the way, the responses and I'd say even reactions, that the body has to different things, different experiences, different interactions, it will come out in the form of what everyone would have seen last month, which is rashes, physical pain, exhaustion, all of those kinds of things. If I'm spending the time that's necessary to attend to that, and really, really process and be with whatever is happening in life, I really don't experience that at all. But it also means that I have to be willing to feel. And when you're an empath, that can feel like dangerous territory. It's scary, and it's scary to be in the company and in the presence of people experiencing something really reactive and difficult or triggering, because it has a tendency to it does that Velcro thing. It snags and it pulls, and it can be painful, and it can leave you kind of sort of halfway out of your body, and it's awful. So I don't know. I think probably for most of us, being empathic is kind of like the superhero like the great qualities, that come along with it, and it's also our worst kryptonite. It's like that weird give take thing. The one thing that you're good at, which is really feeling other people and feeling where they are, is the same thing that can leave you feeling completely drained, completely disoriented, out of your body, experiencing, all kinds of really awful and unpleasant, awful and unpleasant side effects as a result. And I would say that probably, the worst experience that I've had with that, since becoming a really serious meditator, has been in the last year, interestingly. And yet, the best times that I've had in the last year have been when I've been around, people who are very sick and dying, which is very interesting. I don't know. The only thing I can really attribute that to is that, and I would say in any other circumstance, I would probably caveat this by saying, I know this sounds corny, but I know that that's not the audience I'm dealing with here, right? But it's what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's on purpose. And when what I'm doing is on purpose, any drain that comes from it is usually down to something that I need to do for myself. And that if I address it, the drain goes away, because it's really a matter of an unmet need, or emotions and things that have come up in response to things that are still kind of locked in the body somewhere and really need my attention and my care. But that generally the happiest I've been in the last year since leaving teaching, which is really where I was deeply happy, very fluid, very all of that. The happiest moments have really been working with dying people, or with grieving people, or with people who are very, very sick. It takes you to, when you're sick, dying, or grieving, it will take you to a place of profound authenticity, in the sense that you are functioning on some level really very much from your highest self. Something very, very sacred is in charge at that moment, and the things that are unnecessary or that don't matter just fall away. And so I find that space a lot easier to be with in terms of dealing with people than being with people who are not in that space, where like it's easier to put on scales of some. We all do. We all have that. We all have our like protection, methods. But knowing that your mortality, or that someone close to you has died, that, what I'm saying, that it takes you right back, right back to the core of who you really are. And literally anything that's not necessary just falls away. It's not important anymore. It just isn't. So yeah, that is just easier than dealing with the layers of additional, for lack of a better term at the moment. And I say this with love and with affection, because we all do it, right? It's nothing to be defensive against or to have a problem with, right? But the only way I could think to say this is like the layers of bullshit, right? I guess the layers of armoring and, the behaviors that come out of us that are a result of like unmet needs and, what's the word I want? Like, yeah, just, or needing, needing the people around us to like us or to see us a certain way. It's all of that stuff. It's that layer of things. That it's just when you're literally deathly ill, or you are in fact dying, or you have just had your entire way of understanding reality and yourself and the nature of life and the universe and everything shaken because someone you love died. Anything unnecessary is just not there. And that's an easy space for me to, or comfortable. It's a comfortable space for me to be with. And I find it very, very energizing. Very energizing to be with and be around so far. So far. I will say that I did have a situation not that long ago where the person who I was still pro bono at that point, and the person who I was working for, that I was there with to support while we were with a family member of hers that was actively dying, ended up in a situation where a couple of her siblings decided that she was a little too high on her own sense of power, which I can tell you she was not at all. They just didn't like, they were brothers, let's be real, they were brothers. They did not like that their sister was allowed to be in charge. Even though she really was the closest person to the dying family member, and she really was the one that was best off to make the decisions on that person's behalf. They threatened to sue her, and then they threatened to sue me. And that was a little exhausting at moments. I really didn't have to deal with it directly. I would only really deal with it, by dealing with the client, and I would listen and support her. And, when someone's in that circumstance, someone that they're deeply close to is dying, and they're not being supported by family members who are, people do crazy things when they don't want to face grief. They do crazy things. And part of the way that this client was processing it was she had to retell it a lot. She needed a lot of validation. So she would talk to me about it, and then I would sit and be present while she would tell, the chaplain, or then she would tell, one of the nurses, or she would tell, whoever, or another friend, or someone who had called on the phone to be supportive. So that was a little tiring, but that was a pretty tough situation. I mean, I think when I look at what could be tougher than that, tougher than having someone threaten to sue you because they think you're killing their family member, who's, in their 90s and has been on hospice for 8 months, I think it would probably be to deal with it where they're actively getting up in your face and getting aggressive, or, that type of scenario. But again, that's about conflict resolution. That's not actually death. So it takes place around the circumstances of someone's death or situation of actively dying, but it's not death. That, I'm sure, will be very trying. I'm sure. And I fully expect that at some point something like that will probably happen. Statistically speaking, it will. And based on what I know from my teachers and mentors, at some point it will. It's inevitable. So another reason why it was really good for me to get a separate business line, right? Because if need be, the phone can be switched off and put away, right? But if you have aggressive, weird people that won't leave you alone and keep calling all the time, you don't want them calling you on your personal number. that the whole, your whole social network and world that you need very badly under those circumstances is dealing with. But, that kind of like, high conflict situations, that's theater, right? Like if you create theater, welcome to high conflict personalities and high conflict situations, though, and it's draining, it can be draining. But no, I mean, where in life are you going to deal with situations where there isn't any conflict? And if it's at least out in the open, it has less of a chance to kind of poison you covertly. So there's that. Anyway, I hope that answers the question. I know that's probably really long. It is, but it's the truth. It's the truth. So, I'll put, as I said, I'll put some resources in the description box, and yeah, I think I actually am gonna unbox the Empathic Oracle now because it just arrived in the mail. So how funny the timing worked with that. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna sit down and eat my fruit and yogurt, which I've been ignoring. Drink my little kombucha, which I haven't been, and do the unboxing. So anyway, thanks everybody. I'm really excited about sharing this stuff and having just having a platform and an audience for that. So thank you. All right, take care.